Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People, an intentionally inclusive hub of sex-positive resources. I'm your host, Courtney Brame, and I want to thank Waxo for their ongoing support of this podcast and for allowing me to promote the podcast, talk about STIs and herpes stigma all over their platform. Visit www.waxo.com, and you can see a recent article I contributed to. It's about 5 ways to have a healthy friends with benefits situation. There are very good points there, and I'm a little bit nervous about having shared my own experience with a friend with benefits that I had, and how awesome that relationship was. Don't get me wrong, but it's just a little bit more intimate about my personal life than I usually get, even for the podcast. But there's just something about writing it versus saying out loud that makes it a little bit easier. But then in hindsight, you're like, oh my God, so many people are going to see this. So I enjoy writing it and sharing that experience. And I believe in friends with benefit situations when things are intentional, when there's transparency, and when there's ongoing communication and just checking in with one another. So you can see the full details there again at waxo.com. This episode of Something Positive for Positive People features Emily Arnstein, and she is about body positivity. As you listen to this, you'll just get a feel for it. You'll know exactly why this is titled what it is. I want to add a trigger warning in here because we do talk a little bit about domestic abuse, and if you need to protect yourself, I understand you don't have to listen to the episode, or if you get around that part and you need to take a break, please do whatever you need to do in order to take care of yourself. If you like this episode, please rate, review, and share this podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on, please leave us a review. It helps us get promoted. There is temporarily going to be a survey up. If you're listening to this before July 24th, it will do so much for us if we can get you to answer 2 question Survey Monkey. The link is going to be in the show notes, and I'll have the link on my Instagram page through July 24th, 25th. I'm collecting data about people's experience when they're diagnosed. So when you're diagnosed, if you experience any of the emotions that are listed on the survey, and then just explain in a short answer how Something Positive for Positive People, the podcast, helped you through that or with that. And gathering that data is going to help me with a very big thing that I have coming up, and I'll share more information about it in the event that I find out I'm able to go. But it's called STD Engage if you want to Google it, and if you check, you'll see exactly why this is such a great fit for Something Positive for Positive People. So I got my fingers crossed. I'm just hoping for a lot of responses to this survey. I really only need 100, and we're halfway there already. I just posted it yesterday. So thank you so much for everyone who has been engaging and supportive here. And if I've helped you in any way, again, just through the podcast, please submit that survey. I hope you enjoy this episode with Emily Arnstein. Stay sex positive. There was something that you posted online about a negative interaction that you had with someone dating. You were like, you didn't feel the connection there, and after saying this, he just kind of went off the rails about how you look. You remember that?
Yeah. Initially, we went on the date, and I just didn't feel a connection. Like, nothing really bad happened. It just was that, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not as attracted to him as I thought I was going to be, or the chemistry wasn't there. And so after the date, he texted pretty soon after and was like, when can we meet up again? And I was like, you know what, it would be nice to be completely blunt and just say, I didn't feel a connection, I'm sorry. And he kept asking like a lot of questions about why, and I was like, there's no reason why, I just don't feel a connection. Because nothing bad happened, so there was no reason for it to be, this reason, that reason, this reason. It was just, sometimes you just don't feel it. And he took it as an opportunity to be like, well, you're just a dumb white bitch, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, why are we using the B word? Why are we throwing race into this? And it just had nothing to do with my comment. And I think we went back and forth several times to just handle it. Like, he kept asking me more questions, and I was trying to give him the same general answer, and he just was really upset about it.
And when you say that there wasn't a connection, what are we talking? Because I just had a dating coach on here recently, and we talked about chemistry. We didn't use the word connection. We just used the word chemistry, which we've identified as like this spark of things that sometimes aren't necessarily good for us, but they're like very short term, like, this is great, this is amazing, but that chemistry doesn't seem to really be sustainable long term. So when you say connection, what do you mean?
I think just when the conversation flows naturally, and then there are things about them that you feel that could carry on into more conversation, like actual dates and interactions. Like, oh, we both like the same music. Let's go, see this person in concert. Like there was nothing to connect on. I didn't find him particularly unattractive, but I didn't find him particularly attractive. And there was no, there was no interest in pursuing a physical relationship with him. I didn't see myself kissing him at the end of the date. Definitely didn't see sex on the table at any point. But it doesn't mean he was not an attractive person, just I didn't feel the connection or the chemistry.
Yeah. Was there any sign at all that would have let you know that he was the kind of person who would just go off on you because he didn't get what he wanted?
In hindsight, there might have been something about his personality that I could have predicted he would go off. And I say that because I've been in one severely abusive relationship and then a couple sort of like more emotional abuse. And typically people that do go off in that way also are very clingy. They get attached really quickly. And so I noticed right off the bat, and I think this might have also been part of what turned me off, was that on that date, he was just really eager and like talking about the future like we had already been on 10 dates. And part of that could have been what turned me off and maybe created the lack of chemistry. But definitely also could have alerted me to the fact that he might not respond at all to me rejecting him.
Yeah.
This was someone I met on, I want to say, maybe Plenty of Fish.
Oh, nothing against Plenty of Fish.
So that says anything to you.
You didn't see any opportunity for this going anywhere, but you mentioned red flags being signs of a potential abuser and that you've been in abusive relationships before. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So the big one that I talk about when I say I've been in an abusive relationship. So what I mentioned that was a red flag about that previous date was that the intensity of it and like sort of his eagerness. And that was actually something that I learned after I got out of my abusive relationship through support groups and through therapy, that people who tend to be abusers come on really, really strong at the beginning. So that relationship that I was in, we met and we basically hung out every single day from the day that we met. And we moved in together 3 months into the relationship. And everybody was like, what? Like, you guys can't possibly be ready to move in together. But, I was head over heels because the intensity of it also is the draw. You get really caught up in the fact that, wow, this person feels this strongly about me, so it must be, it must be destined. He must be the one. I also was like 25 at the time, so not necessarily the brightest about what I wanted and needed at that time. So we moved in together 3 months in, and within a week of moving in together, he was like, I feel like you love me more than I love you. And I was like, whoa. And that led to a breakup. And this was before any of the real abuse had happened. That led to a breakup, and then we had just signed a year-long lease. So we were sort of debating who would stay there, who would leave, and I had the money in the relationship. And so I was like, well, I don't want to kick you out on your ass, so you can stay. So we sort of had this, like, not really platonic. We were still intimate, but he was living there, but we weren't together situation. And over the course of that first month of living together, I was like, he's out every single night. He never comes and stays home. I have this feeling that he's seeing other people. And then I thought about it to myself, and I was like, well, if I wanted to see other people, I guess I could too. So I went out with some friends one night and sort of like reacquainted with an old like friend with benefits situation. And I ended up staying with that friend that night. And I didn't expect to come home in the morning and see him there because he hadn't stayed. My now ex had not stayed at our apartment at all. So I expected to come home at 4:00 in the morning and nobody was going to be home. And of course, it's the one time he was home, and he was also drunk, and was like, "Where were you?" And I am not one to lie. I don't have that in me, like to come up with some false story on the spot. And so I just was like, "Oh, I was on a date," or I forget how I worded it. And then immediately he just started like swinging at me, and that was the first of several incidents, because once that happened, he did it and then was like super, super apologetic afterwards and crying and just like, "I'm sorry, I don't know where it came from. I don't know why I did that." And they always say with abusive relationships, the good is really, really good and the bad is really, really bad. So sometimes you get caught up because the good is so good. And so his apology was like, also like, "I'm going to buy you this thing and I'm going to do this for you and I'm going to cater to your every whim," because he felt like he had to make it up to me. And so that we had this push and pull dynamic for, it was maybe about 3 more months where it would get really, really, really good. And then I would, maybe go out one night with friends, not doing anything with anybody, and he would just make assumptions and it would turn into something physical. And so that went on for about 3 months. And then the very last time that we were together, that I actually saw him face to face, besides court after that, was that I was at my parents' house, and he called me and was like, "Can we talk?" And so I came outside, and he was like, "Can we sit in the car and talk?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess we can sit in the car and talk." And I get in the passenger seat of the car, and he just takes off and takes me basically back to our apartment. And that was probably the worst of the abuse. I don't even remember how I actually got out the door because he wasn't letting me go anywhere. And when I did end up leaving, I immediately called a friend to come pick me up. And then when I got to that friend's house, they were like, "You're calling your parents." And I called my parents. And then it was this whole, obviously, once my parents knew that this was happening, then, there was a restraining order and there was court and there was all this stuff. He ended up getting bailed out by a girlfriend at the time, which I didn't know about. And they are now married and have a child. So, he got off, like, with a slap on the wrist. I think he had to pay me some money in restitution because he had damaged my property. But other than that, it was like some community service and some like classes that he had to take about anger management or something like that. But that's all he got for it. And and I had to walk away and then deal with this the rest of my life.
So, and correct me, and I apologize in advance if I'm asking any inappropriate questions here, but when the abuse took place the first time, can I ask you, why didn't you talk to a friend when that happened? Or was it just the highs and the lows that you spoke of? It's like, "Oh, he really loves me, he won't do it again."
Yeah, well, part of that is you're a little bit in shock when someone abuses you for the first time. You're like, I didn't see that in this person, because you also, again, you saw the intensity of how good they are. And so you're like, they must not have meant to do that. You want to see the best in people. And so immediately after that first time, when he was super apologetic and he was crying, I was like, well, if I tell somebody that he did this, they're going to make me call the police, and then he's going to get in trouble, and then, like, there's no coming back from this. So I want to feel it out and see if this was, like, a one-time thing, or, and now I'm hearing myself say this, and I'm like, that's so dumb. Like, a one-time thing is bad enough. But, if I felt in that moment that I maybe wanted to see the relationship work, I felt that if I told anybody, then that ruined the chances of that happening.
Okay. And then after it happened again, what was the new narrative?
So what ends up happening is after that first time, the fact that the first time he beat me was because I had slept with somebody. Now, at this point, I didn't know that he had been with anybody else. I just thought he might have. And so he used that against me every time after that. Well, you cheated, or you went off and slept with so-and-so, so you don't really love me, and you're a liar and you're a bad person. And the more that somebody tells you these things, you start to feed into it. So I eventually got to a place where when he would go off on me, whether it was verbal abuse or physical, that I felt like I had done something to initiate it.
Okay. All right. I just wanted a little bit of insight there, and it's because I know of people who are and have been in abusive relationships, and you can just kind of tell from the outside looking in. There were things that I would notice, but in hindsight, are there things that your family and friends would notice or would have noticed to pull you aside and ask you, hey, are you okay? And about the relationship?
Not that particular one, but I think the reason for that is because I kind of kept it to myself. I think when you know somebody is that kind of person, you don't really share them with other people, and they in turn don't want to share your relationship with other people because it enables them to kind of keep you to themselves.
Mm-hmm. What do you think you needed while you were in the relationship in order to have either helped you get out of it or be stronger in the relationship to be like, hey, I'm not taking this shit? Like, what support around you could you have used?
Honestly, I think that what would have given me a better out of that relationship would have been having a better feeling about myself at that time. I think that looking back on it, I didn't think I was hot shit. Like I felt like maybe he was the best I could get, or that maybe I deserved what I was getting. Which is so funny because I'm such an intelligent person. I'm like a very smart woman, and for some reason, they even statistically say that most of the women that end up in abusive relationships are the most highly educated. And it's so odd to think that, I, as smart as I am, couldn't get myself out of it. Because I'm also just a really empathetic person, and I want to see the best in people. Now that I have had the proper education through support groups and therapy after it all went down, now I almost wonder if I'm on the opposite side of it, where I see red flags immediately, or I'm just a little bit more on high alert, and I'm not going to put up with anything that could remotely lead to abuse. But also on the positive side of that, I am in a place now where I have a great perception of self and know my worth, and there's no way that somebody could get away with that again.
All right. So this isn't something where you're attracted to particular traits of an abuser and then you kind of have to just keep your guard up from those traits. This is more about you loving yourself and having a higher perception of who you are in order to really just know that you're not going for any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just being able to stand up for myself and my values. I don't think I was, and still sometimes I struggle with, my assertiveness or being able to say, hey, that's not okay, which, I think that's what ended up getting me into several of the previous relationships I've been in, because remember I said he was the most physical, but I've been in multiple relationships before and after that had elements of emotional abuse too, because I just, it has taken me some time to feel out what it is that is wrong with these kinds of relationships. You don't really see it while you're in it. Now I think. Okay. I'm still single, so who knows? But I think so.
Yeah, we've talked about physical abuse. Can we talk a little bit about the emotional abuse? Because it seems more covert.
Yeah. The kinds of emotional abuse that I am referring to are things like keeping tabs on each other, like needing to know where your whereabouts at all times kind of thing, or just like in general, a controlling type of personality, and then questioning your every move. So like one of the emotionally abusive relationships I was in, so I had a boyfriend who was not emotionally abusive or physically. He was great. We were together for about 2.5 years. He had been staying at my house, and when we broke up, there were still some of his belongings here. And when I had a new boyfriend, the one who was emotionally abusive, he found things like in the medicine cabinet, like cologne and things like that. And even with all of my explanation, he would be like, "You still love him," and all this stuff. And I was like, "I swear to you," but then I took it upon myself. I need to prove to him that I don't love this person anymore. And like, this is so stupid. Like, there should be no reason not to trust me if I say, "Yeah, we broke up. He left his stuff here. End of discussion."
Mm-hmm. You mentioned like keeping tabs on one another. I feel like the questioning constantly highlights a red flag of insecurity and or clinginess, whereas when both parties in the relationship are willing to just check in with one another or offer, "Hey babe, I'm gonna be at so and so at this place with this person at this time, you're welcome to come if you want," or the other person just offering, "Okay, well, I'm just gonna stay here tonight and play video games," for example. Like, that to me demonstrates a healthy element that shows a healthy relationship, whereas what seems to be unhealthy is like the questioning, the "I need to know," the like "give me your information." Like, there's not constant giving, and there's no equivalent exchange of it. Does that make sense?
Yes, and actually what I'm finding now is more of an issue for me, is that I now volunteer way too much information because I'm so used to being questioned that I'll be like, "I'm going so-and-so's house, but don't worry, we're going to be doing this," and and I'm like constantly checking in because I feel like that's what somebody would want from me, which in a healthy relationship, they shouldn't need all of that information.
Right. What are some other elements of emotional abuse? Because physical abuse is completely on the surface, and then emotional abuse is something that you don't realize. Like, I didn't know how damaging emotional abuse could be until I've seen it firsthand, where a person is being isolated from every person in their lives to where they become completely dependent on this other person. And I almost feel like that's what happens before physical abuse and violence take place. Am I in the ballpark there, or is it just...
Yeah, absolutely. There, man, if I think back on it, there were the emotional part is the stuff that sticks with you. It's like, it's not the physical stuff. I still have a lot of PTSD regarding the physical things. Like actually, my trainer, we tried to do boxing once, and he told me some sequence, and I was supposed to duck at some point, and I didn't duck, and he like lightly swung his hand and hit me in the face a little bit, and we had like to end the session there because I was in tears. So definitely some PTSD regarding the physical stuff, but the emotional stuff is what sticks with you. And even when I'm having a conversation with someone, with a man usually, and there's a disagreement, I get the same sensation in my body that I would have when I was having an argument with an abusive ex. It just comes from like, "Oh God, I'm being accused of something, and now I have to like make up for it," and that's the stuff that really sticks with you. Or like some of the other things that happen in previous relationships, and the physically abusive one in particular, was that he would get the passwords to all my email accounts and like Facebook account, or I think it was MySpace at the time. He had access to my MySpace, and like, so if I vented to a girlfriend about him or about something that happened, or if I talked about a guy I flirted with or something, it was like he knew about it. But rather than saying like, "Hey, I know you went out and flirted with this guy," he would be like, "So, did you see anybody tonight?" And just leave it like really open like that. And then I would go, "Well, I did. Does he know?" He couldn't possibly know. And you start to do all these like things in your head where you're circling around going like, what does he know? What doesn't he know? And at the end of the day, he already had all the information and was just trying to get it out of me.
Mm.
It felt like I was constantly being tested and, probed. And I think that all the time now, like when I'm in relationships, I'm like, this is why I'm so brutally honest, because I'm like, they already know. I can't get away with it.
Wow. This is really enlightening for me because I've been in relationships where we've kept tabs on one another. We needed to know what the other person was doing. There was this distrust and the need to know the passwords and text messages going through one another's phones and everything. And like in hindsight now, I realize how ridiculous that was and how the insecurities that surrounded those actions. And I know that I had a lot of work to do in order to get through that. And so I want to know, like, what was your healing process from this? Like, you're talking about you have PTSD from it, you've gone to therapy, you've been in support groups, and you really just needed to learn your own self-worth, and that was kind of what helped you with being able to stay away from those situations altogether. So can you talk to us a little bit about that process?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's been a long road, because that was 2009, so we're talking, yeah, we're 10 years later now, and I still have work to do, but the building myself up process has been the most valuable to me. Some of the building up for me has been on a physical level, like owning my body type and, owning what I look like and my physical appearance. That's been a really big thing for me, and that all kind of came about me starting to work with a trainer in the last couple of years, and not because I lost a bunch of weight. I did, but I've also gained it all back at certain times. But it was taking the value off of that, taking the value off of needing to be smaller or bigger, or what that means when I'm smaller or bigger, all of those things. So, building myself up on a physical level and knowing that regardless of what I look like at any given time, I'm still attractive, because I don't think I felt that about myself when I was in those abusive relationships. And then developing my assertiveness, that's the biggest work in progress still, but just feeling brave enough to say when something doesn't feel right or something's not right. And actually that came from having some friends who are on much more the assertive side, and I just sort of watch them and try to model some of my behavior after that. Actually, one good example is that I was at a hula, I'm a hula dancer, by the way. So I was at a hula competition, and we were just at a bar afterwards. And this guy came up to me in he had a cowboy hat on, and he was this older white guy, and came up to me, and I was dancing along to the music, and he grabbed me by the face and tried to kiss me. And my best friend at the time was excuse me, and swatted him away, and he was like, oh, sorry, and after he left, my initial response was to go back and listen to music. My best friend at the time was like, do you want me to go talk to the management of it was at a hotel bar, do you want me to go talk to the manager? And I was like, no, it's okay. And she was like, I'm going to go talk to the manager, make sure he doesn't come back at the very least. And just watching her handle that situation, I was like, wow, I really was going to do nothing about that. And so now I'm working on those situations. And I had a recent incident where I went to one of those sort of Magic Mike type of shows. And the same thing, the guy, one of the dancers, I told my girlfriends, I said, I don't want anybody giving me lap dance. I do not want them on me. I don't want them touching me. Lock me in. Don't let them near me. Guy pushed my friends out of the way, got on my lap, and I said, no, thank you, several times. And he kept going. And so after that was over, I filed a complaint with the management, and I took care of that situation myself. And I was really proud of that, even though it doesn't seem like a big deal. It was a huge deal to me to actually be able to say no and follow through when my no wasn't taken seriously.
Yeah, I can imagine how empowering that is, coming from a space of helplessness to neutrality to having done something, or even before that, having seen your friend take up for you in the situation, and then finally take action for yourself. So now, is that an ongoing thing for you, where when you find yourself in uncomfortable situations, you're not only able to say no, but you're able to follow through with that no if needed, rather than just fight or flight? Well, I guess it's not fight or flight. It's more like a fight or flight or freeze,
I think that I want to be the peacemaker. Like, I just don't want things to get volatile because I've been on that end of it. So usually I'm just like, oh, it's fine. Nobody, we won't talk about it. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that doing that for myself, or seeing my friend do it first, then doing it for myself, I saw that, like, yeah, people don't like it. Like, he was not happy when the management came and talked to him. And I'm sure that the guy at the male review was not happy when his manager called him out on it or whatever, however it was handled afterwards. And I'm still okay.
Yeah.
I'm still okay. They got in trouble, and I'm still okay, and I think I'm like, I don't want to be the bad guy all the time, but I'm like, wait, they were the bad guy. Why am I feeling this way, And I think that has helped me in other situations after that, just handling the fact that I'm going to tell somebody something, and they're not going to like it, but if it was something that that was for my betterment, and there was actually a podcast I was listening to where she was saying that there's a difference between being difficult and being toxic. When you're difficult, you maybe tell somebody something that it could hurt their feelings, they're not going to like it, but you're saying it because it's for your betterment. But you're not saying it to hurt them, and toxic people are saying it to, like, break you down. And so, when I tell somebody something like, don't do that, or I didn't like that, or whatever, I'm not saying it to hurt their feelings. I'm saying it because it hurt my feelings,
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's interesting to me the most here is that when you say no and you say it's not okay, the man feels like he can continue the behavior. But the minute another man or authoritative figure steps in, that's when they start to think about their actions. So there's almost like this complete disregard for women's bodies, women's women just standing up for themselves until another man steps into the picture. And it's really fucked up that that's the kind of world that we live in. And for women to stick together, like you and your friend going up to the bar manager, the club manager, and saying, hey, that man, ... like, being able to stick up for one another is probably the best defense that I would say women have, and having that support between one another, and then allyship from men to call that shitty behavior out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sucks because as a woman, like you said, you're not taken seriously when you file a complaint, or you just say no. But then, there's that line between assertiveness and aggressiveness. And then if you come on stronger and, like, maybe push them off, or, you have to take it further than that, then you're a bitch, then, oh man, like, she went crazy on me.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and like, you push somebody off, you're a bitch. But what happens when you start stabbing and tasing and macing people? Then what do you become? Like, I bet people learn their lesson then.
Right, yeah, hopefully I never have to get to that point.
I hope not to. In terms of that healing process, so after we're at this point now where you're empowered, you told someone no, and you took the next step and followed through. I guess I'm segueing into the body positivity portion of this, because you said you got a personal trainer and you had to learn that how your body looked didn't define you. Like, you removed the value of your worth around your body. Can you talk to us about that? Because I think that that's a really important element of what it means to be body positive, to accept and appreciate your body for what it does for you, and understand that you can make it smaller, you can make it larger, you can make it more muscular, you can make it do things for you that you need it to do.
Yeah, and I think what you just said about it doing things for you that you need it to do was the biggest thing for me, was that, I grew up being a ballet dancer, and I'm 5'2", and like, I sort of average between 125 to 135 pounds. So for someone who's 5'2", that's not super skinny, but I'm not heavy by any means. But at when I was younger and going through puberty, and probably like 120 pounds or maybe less than that, I was told I was fat, or I was told nobody's gonna want to see you in this costume, or we don't have any costumes that will fit you. And I grew up feeling that way about myself, through my 20s, thinking I was sort of beneath every other woman who just happened to have a naturally smaller build. I'm much more, like, I guess you would say pear-shaped, so I have much more, like, hips than thighs and a booty, and that was always, like, a big no-no for ballet, because, like, you don't want to be bottom-heavy at all. You don't want to have bottom or top-heavy. You don't want to have anything that defines you as a woman on your body. And so once I was able to start training and focusing more on what my body was able to do versus what it looked like, that became the driving force for me. I was like, well, I want to lift more weight, or I want to be able to do that exercise in a shorter amount of time. So there were just so many other goals for my body that had nothing to do with weight loss. And then I also did like a month-long challenge where I did completely alter my diet, sort of the way like somebody would do for a fitness competition. And I got down to 113 pounds, which for me is like, my body doesn't like it. It's not its natural state in any way, shape, or form. But I did it. I can say I've been skinny. There was no real value about that. It was just a different body for me. It looked good. I've looked good heavier. I've looked good smaller. Like, it just didn't mean anything. And seeing that I could, I've done photo shoots at my smallest. I've done photo shoots at my, not necessarily largest, but like, at a more comfortable weight. And they're all great photos, so just being able to still talk about myself as like a fit person in all of those bodies has been really cool for me.
All right. And how did your personal trainer or training help you outside of like you being able to see what your body can do? Was your trainer supportive at all, or just like, hey, you're doing a great job? Or did you have that support and motivation behind you for the same reason that you were beginning to be impressed with yourself?
Yeah, my trainer's great. He was very, I would say like 90% of our sessions are for like the purpose of exercise and training, and then there's like a 10%, and sometimes that's a whole session, because I've been training with him for almost 3 years now. Sometimes there is an entire session that's dedicated to talking. Mm-hmm. And maybe we might put a couple exercises in, and then afterwards we'll like sort of debrief and go like, do you feel like you didn't get anything out of this session today because we didn't exercise? And I'm like, no, I needed that. I just needed to get all this out, one of the things about having a trainer versus work, because I had worked out on my own for years. Because like I said, I was constantly trying to modify my body, and I was going on every crash diet in the book and all these things. And, one of the benefits to having a trainer was that I never would have pushed myself as hard as he pushed. And on a physical level, there are things that I was terrified of doing. And now I'm looking back on those times. When I first started training with him, I would not do a box jump because I suffered a knee injury, and I was like, nope, not jumping that high. And I think I've done at least 30 inches or higher. And I've jumped over several things that are probably higher than that. And now my phrase when he gives me an exercise that seems to be too challenging is I'll say, hang on, I'm psyching myself up so I can do this. Or hang on, I need a second to mentally prepare. I always say, I'm going to do it, just give me a second, versus I don't know if I can do that. Yeah. That's never enough.
It's very important how we talk to ourselves, too. So it's good that you were able to change the narrative from I can't do that to hold on, give me a second to hype myself up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that has carried over into all these aspects of my life where there's not a whole lot of I can't anymore. There's not a whole lot of I don't think that that's for me or that that I'm capable of that. A lot of my self-narrative now is, well, let me think about how I can do that. I think a lot of things in my life that I've achieved in the last couple of years have been me approaching them by saying, I may not have all the tools to do this right now, or I may not know how, but I'm going to do it eventually. Just give me a second to figure it out.
I like that. All right. So that concludes everything that I wanted us to cover. Is
Mhm.
there anything else that you want to leave us with?
Oh man. Um, I think one of the things that I have talked a lot about in some of my social media and that I want to get across is that you you don't need to do everything all at one time. Like you don't need to get from A to B tomorrow, today. Doing a little bit to start is fine. You'll get there eventually. And being patient with yourself to get to an outcome, or whether it's being, loving your body. Like that's one thing, obviously that I've spent a lot of time on, and I'm not going to say that I'm 100% there all the time. But any self-acceptance doesn't come overnight. Start, like we said, start reframing the way that you talk about yourself, or the way that you talk about what you can and can't do, or what you think you can and can't do. In general, make little changes, little adjustments, and stop expecting the results to happen tomorrow. I think that is, out of everything that I have gathered over the last number of years, that has been the biggest takeaway for me, is just to do a little now, see how that feels, and then proceed.
Yeah. And just to add to that, you don't always have to get directly from A to B. There are several letters in the alphabet. You can go from point A to point F and understand that you can get to B, C, D, and E first. So if you need to break things down a little bit more in order to make smaller, more simple, easily attainable steps in the process along the way, then do that. Just be gentle with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also know that sometimes you're gonna fail, and actually, another podcast I was listening to earlier today, they were talking about how so many people give up after the first failed attempt at something, and we all want to be a master at something before we've even gotten started yet. And half the time you're gonna try something, you're gonna try one aspect of something, and it's not gonna work out quite right, and you're gonna have to jump to a different letter of the alphabet. It may not be the next one in line, but you're not always gonna be successful on your first try with most things. And just to be gentle with yourself, because we're human, and nobody, if you're that lucky to go from A to Z, good for you.
Thank you so much, Emily. And you mentioned your social media. How can people find you?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Healthy Hula Girl. No underscores, no nothing fancy. I just recently started an apparel line that's related to health and wellness, body positivity, self-love, and then also hula, because I'm a hula dancer. And so there's designs that are kind of more fitness related, some that are a little bit more Hawaiian. So that's Healthy Hula Girl Apparel on Instagram. And then Facebook, same thing, Healthy Hula Girl, but those are 3 separate words. And then Healthy Hula Girl Apparel on Facebook.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People, the intentionally inclusive hub of sex-positive resources. Please like, rate, review, and share this podcast so that you can help us get promoted by the podcast companies that promote the podcast, and help us just get this out there to people who need these resources. If you like this episode, just share it with somebody. Let us know what you think. Go and follow Emily on social media, Healthy Hula Girl Apparel, and Healthy Hula Girl on Facebook. Till next time, stay sex positive.